You guys thought porpoising was gone? Well, it's back, baby, and it's taking victims. We had a race that I think could have eventuated. I think you said we were robbed of something potentially there. And I think that's
robbed of something.
Yeah, robbed of a potential Ferrari Red Bull clash again with some differing strategies. We're gonna usually we would break it down event by event. We're gonna break it down team by team this time around because I think there are a lot of stories going on. The biggest of which, let's start with the big elephant in the room. That's Ferrari.
Big red elephant.
Big red elephant. Is that Ferrari done? Like I just have this legitimately a legitimate question. Is that them? Like it feels like a massive turning point for them. They were at the start of the season, they were the one to beat, and we were talking about how they're going to run away with it. And I'm now at the point of I don't know that they can recover from this. I think
that's the reason that you can't say that are they done, because we've already been in this where it's the other way around, and then so suddenly it snapped. It's not even like we're near the end of the year we've gone, oh, they've pulled it back, and things look bad, but it wasn't that long ago when things look really bad for Red Bull too. So who knows, right? Who bloody knows? All we know is that it's different going from where you started rocky and then you've got yourself together, from when you started strong and then you start going downhill. It almost seems worse, right?
That's what I was about to allude to. Is it's further into the season when teams should be working out of their problems. Yes. And you would say that Red Bull have gotten on top of whatever reliability issues they were having, whereas Ferrari are now just starting to have their reliability issues. And what
Ferrari
seems to be,
and Co. is notable.
Exactly, yeah. We'll go on to that. But it just seems like it particularly now with Red Bull being what seems like a really well-rounded car, with particularly in the race. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But two drivers performing very, very well. It just seems like I'm going to put it out there. I do think this will be a turning point. Genuinely.
I agree. It's a turning point. Yeah.
I think this will be the race we'll look back at and say, yeah, this is where Ferrari lost the championship. One of the biggest reasons why I say this, I should probably talk at what happened. Obviously, Sainz went out with a hydraulic issue relatively early in the race. And then obviously the big one, Leclerc out in the lead on an alternate strategy. It was sort of the preferred strategy while everyone else went onto the alternate. But yeah, they all pitted, I think, earlier than expected.
He pitted earlier than expected because he had a very early virtual
he did. No,
Sainz. Because
so
Sainz sputtered out and parked it up, then he kind of took the opportunity to box super early.
Yep.
And we were kind of saying that it denied us of a good race because the big point is some people were even saying before the race, well, is this a two-stop or a one-stop? And he pitted super early, but it seemed like that was to then trying to do the one-stop in the long term of things. So it was a case of going, oh, look at this. He's got the advantage now, and the Red Bulls are kind of closing. How is this going to play out? And it was kind of in that middle ground of the race, so we're like, okay, things are just going to play out before we just get our popcorn out, and check your microwave, how many minutes have you got left before you grab your popcorn, and we start seeing it all. And then suddenly, as you say, we cut to the back straight, and you just saw poof and smoke everywhere, and you went, oh, well, there's only one Ferrari left, so it's got to be the other one. And instantly over the radio, you heard him just echoes of Spain, of course, of just going like, oh my God, really.
It's not good. Really, really not good. One of the biggest reasons why I think this is such a big turning point is the fact that Matteo Binotto's come out and said they don't even know why it's going wrong. And that's a big red flag.
It's a big question marks everywhere going, what the fuck?
They're just saying they're not even sure if it's failures within the engine itself or whether it's the energy recovery system. They don't even know what part is going, what's destroying these engines. It's that's not okay. That's, I think it's medium to long term in terms of a fix. They're saying they can't fix this in the next sort of 3 or 4 races. It's going to be later than that. By then it's too late. Red Bull, if they have got on top of all their reliability and they keep doing these 1-2s and fastest lap and getting these maximum points, they're gone. They're already running away with it. Ferrari are already closer to Mercedes than they are to Red Bull now.
That's a big statistic, isn't it?
Come on. We're actually getting to a point, I reckon, if depending on how things shape up, we could have Red Bull out in front and now Ferrari and Mercedes fighting for second. Who would have thought of that 4 races ago?
And we're only about a third of the way into the series. And not only that, but let's be real, if Ferrari have to start throwing time and money into this,
Exactly.
well, then they're off their plan for that. We already know restricted on budget, restricted on time. They're one of the ones knocking on the door saying this is a really tough championship with cost.
Yep.
They're going to have to park whatever plan they had to try kill with Red Bull, while Red Bull potentially just going across their normal path.
Yep.
And so they're already going to be falling behind in that aspect. So by the time they do fix it, well, they're, bring on 2023.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, on top of that as well, it's like if they keep having all these like power unit failures, they're going to have to take so many new parts, which means more penalties, which means they stop further back in later races as well. So it's like, even if they can get on top of it, if they've already destroyed that many engine parts that they have to every few races they have to take a new part anyway, and they're like 6 parts deep, and they have to start middle of the pack or like at the back of the field or from the pit lane. Every 3 or 4 races, like that alone could be enough to drop them that far back. And couple that with the fact, like you say, that if they can't develop the car like they want to, they could genuinely fall back into the grips of Mercedes, particularly as they're starting to come to grips with their car and getting a lot more pace out of it. Before we move on to Mercedes, I do want to talk about, because we talk about Ferrari, we'll talk about Red Bull, because they had, as we mentioned, pretty much a perfect weekend again. It was very
cruising,
very Imola-esque. They get the 1-2 and fastest lap. In this instance, it was even better because Ferrari scored exactly 0 points this time around. It's that they seem to just have, which I think we talked about in the last couple of videos, but they just have that race pace. They've already figured out that we can sacrifice the qualifying pace. We can, as long as we qualify in that second row, maybe pick up a P2, maybe sneak a P1 if things go our way. But you can start from 3rd, 4th on the grid in most places. And it's like,
most places, yes.
Most places, obviously. And be like, okay, we'll just set it up for race day. And they're just so comfortable. Max in particular is just so comfortable on race day. He can just manage his pace perfectly, manage the tires and just look so at ease with that car on a Sunday. Perez is an interesting one because he's obviously found a little bit more in qualifying. Like, he's actually on a couple of occasions now, he's looked the stronger driver of the 2 Red Bulls on a Saturday.
Yes, yeah. And he normally the biggest criticism against him was on race day. He had his tips and tricks, but quali was where he struggled. And now it almost seems like quali is his strong suit, and race is where maybe his old strong point, especially in this race. Normally his tyre wear, there seemed to be a lot of talk that actually part of the reason he lost a bit of his pace to Verstappen this weekend because he really just fudged around with his tyres. And I guess he was lucky in the fact that, look, he could just casually, crawl to a second place anyway. There was not much pressure from behind, last-minute safety cars, etc. But it is interesting how it seems like his talents have almost flipped in a way, and I guess that makes it more interesting for us in that if he is now qualifying ahead of Max, it's a bit of like, they seem to be working well together. I mean, we heard it pretty stern on the radio, no fighting and kind of a bit of silence and fair enough. And everyone was a little bit like, oh, after Spain, that's interesting. But, I mean, he's just signed a new contract. As a team, they've got to be super happy. This isn't a case of like, it's Lewis and Rosberg and they're, neck and tooth and there's no one else there. And they're just like, no, I want to win it. Oh, I hate you. They're kind of just like, no, let's just take these wins and then, moving forward, see where we're at. So
it could get that way. I mean, it is Red Bull, Verstappen, Perez are now 1-2 in drivers. There's not that many points between them. It could still go Checo's way if he finds the pace on race day that he's been managing on the Saturday. So, the whole no fighting thing, again, people are making it out to be, I think, bigger than it actually was.
Especially there, his pace advantage, as we said, with the tires was colossal. And even if he wanted to, or a bit of a show, there was no logic in it whatsoever. And I think Perez pretty quickly realized that.
I think even after the race, these comments he made is just like, I don't know, I didn't feel like I was taking life out of the tires, but just struggling for traction. particularly after
And
that.
to be fair,
Yeah.
he put the effort in at the start. He,
Yeah.
You know.
And I think
he,
that's...
he bloody floored it. And
That's it.
part of it might have been his downfall, but still
Yeah.
he was able to, again, show that, hey, actually, if he's in that position
Yep.
and he can get a good start, a good jump, then bloody hell, you know, it's not like the Bottas Hamilton of old, where you'd see sometimes Bottas would be up there, but then he just didn't have that fight in the moment. You feel like Checo, now that he's actually able to qualify up there, is now showing I can get the shoulders out. You know, he did it in Monaco, and now he's done it again here. So
yeah, really good.
I think it's
dive up the inside
yeah.
for the lead at the start.
Yeah.
Was really, really good. But
Yep.
yeah, he it was very. I thought it was important for him to break the toe before the DRS came, and he did that. Obviously, it ended up that it was probably the wrong option because he just took way too much life out of the tires.
Exactly, yes.
But,
at the time, you'd still argue it was probably the right thing, and then with how Leclerc boxed, it probably was going to work in his favour anyway. I guess he was doing that because at the time, he was racing Leclerc, he wasn't really racing Max, or Max was kind of like, I'm going to really chill and save here, and then that ended up being the right call for him.
Yep.
Whether... I think as we did in our predictions, whether it would have been Leclerc or Perez in P2 might have been quite an interesting one again, and it's a shame we didn't see that.
Yeah.
But still, it's, you know, good to know that we've got, well, would you say we've got 4 drivers up there? Sainz seemed at the start to be, like we were all talking about the top 3, and then it almost like we hadn't seen Sainz at all, and the first time we went on board was when he had a problem. I was like, oh yeah, Sainz is here. Oh, he stopped. Okay, well...
yeah, I mean, I guess, well, yeah, moving back to that, I didn't even mention that, but
yeah.
just skipped over it. He was out so early in the race as well. Like it was 17 laps in or something. Like
and there was not a lot notable before that.
Yeah, like even right at the start, you know, he didn't gain a position from his 4th. He was, you know, everyone was talking about how he was struggling. He was taking, you know, the entire practice session just to get up to Charles's level that he was at from, you know, pretty much the first lap of every session. You know, and then come the race, the top 3 start to run away from him, and he's just getting absolutely dropped by the top 3.
He did that thing again where in quali he was actually Q1, Q2 pretty solid, and then at the end when it counted, he kind of just fumbled it. I mean, we were on board with him on his first lap, and it looked pretty good, and we saw, hey, if he can tidy up some of these slides in the first sector, he might have a bombshell here, right?
Yeah.
And then we were on board with him for his second lap, and he was all over the place, and he was 5/10 down. It was like, oh, buddy, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So it's almost like he seems to almost build up for the weekend, and then it just crashes in Q3, and then he's just done for the rest of it. It's not a good trend. You're almost like I'm not here saying, oh, get him out of the car, he's doing a poor job, but you're almost saying, you know, when look at, you know, Checo compared to Max, he's obviously now getting up to speed after starting a bit further behind, and now you'd still say that there's still a gap there between, you know, Sainz and Leclerc consistently, and it's like, oh, that's, if it is going to come down to it, where Ferrari really need to push and get up there, is Sainz needs to be the one that's, you know, if Leclerc's P1, well, then that should mean Sainz is P2. Is he going to guarantee that? If it's Max P2, well, that's not good enough. They're not going to be climbing back fast enough, right? Well, I'd say the other way around. If Max is P1 now, it's more likely not to see Checo P2 now rather than Leclerc P2. So a lot of pressure on him. A lot of pressure growing.
We'll see what happens. Again, if the cars keep having issues, then it's kind of a moot point. But yeah, we'll see what eventuates. Hopefully, Ferrari can get on top of whatever issues they have, and we can have a title fight. The last thing I want after such an exciting start to the season is for, you know, a team just to romp away with it. That's not what we want.
Yes.
So let's move on to Mercedes, because Mercedes was, again, there always seems to be a story there. A couple of stories. The first one is the fact that they were quick. They were quite easily the 3rd fastest car, but it came with a sacrifice. As we mentioned at the start. Yeah, it came with a massive sacrifice in the way of Hamilton's spine. Yeah. Yeah, he looked real sore getting out of the car. For those wondering about why George looked fine, apparently they were both running different setups. Hamilton, I think they said he was running an experimental floor setup, and, you know, slightly different setup to George. And George,
and they've done that a few weekends so far.
There
seems to be a trend where they're actually happy to do different things here and there. So not uncommon. Yeah,
and it seems to be that whatever George has found, like every time they talk about how they've gone different setups, it's always because Russell's had the better car. Like he's had the better drive, so he obviously knows how to set up that car a lot better than Lewis does right now. and yeah, that bouncing that he had down that main straight, whether it was like actually porpoising or whether it was just bottoming out constantly because it was so bumpy and whatever it is.
They said it was a little different. It seemed to be less kind of like slower up and down and more like rapid kind of compressions, which is what was just jolting him and the whole time, rather than being more of a traditional bob as we saw at the start of the year, where you kind of just have a bit of flow and a blurry vision.
Yeah, it was bad. Like you could actually see him, like he was going like struggling to keep the car going in a straight line. It was that bad.
Yes.
And I think he was. I think he even came out and said he was like fighting to just control the car in a straight line down that main straight. So, I would say that's one of the longest straights and one of the highest top speeds I think of the calendar though. So
it essentially is, yeah.
I would say that he's probably through the worst of it. There has been a lot of talk about, and now a lot of drivers have come out saying that they're kind of petitioning the FIA or the Formula One and the FIA to try and introduce things to remove the porpoising altogether. I wanted to get your opinion on that because I've had my opinions, which you may have read in the Discord, but
I didn't read it in detail, but I saw. Yes, I did see some of your takes on it.
Yes, what are your takes? Before I go into mine?
I think this is a good chat. I think as a podcast topic, to be honest, I will say at a high level, I think I totally agree with what Christian Horner is saying, whereby all the teams know the rules, and this is kind of the first case where we've had where we haven't really had a case like we've had some cases where cars have been designed to some extreme where it's just kind of been silly or stupid, and through logic we're going, well, let's remove that, right? Like when we had the ducks for driver had to put their knee on a hole or something.
Yeah, the F ducks.
Like that was they kind of went, well, that's a little silly, right? Well, this is a case of saying actually for them to get speed, if the driver, is going to be potentially so uncomfortable, you could say, well, reel it back, but then you'd say, well, no, just go for the performance. Again, an F duck, you'd say, well, bloody hell, why is there a hole in there? That's stupid. They go, yeah, but it's performance. It's just a case where this is now something we've seen that's most effective, and there's not really a rule to say, hey, I guess it's going into some of the solutions here, right? So someone has said they should make that everyone should have to, drive at a minimum height. And understandably, some of the teams have said, well, that's not really fair because, well, we've designed our whole car around, we'll find a way to make it stable low.
Exactly, yeah.
I think some of the drivers floated in like a theoretical idea saying if they could measure like the kind of bouncing, you say, okay, there's some, I don't know, test you could do or a sensor that says over a race weekend, if, your car triggers over a certain measure of bouncing or porpoising, then it can't measure over that. Otherwise, it's counted as unsafe, and you have to design your car around that.
Yeah.
How you test that and design that, I don't really know, because it's not like you can just, a bunch of mechanics sit on the car and do this to test it, right?
Yeah.
But it makes it more saying, as you say, that if you can, run it literally on the ground, sparking everywhere, but it's not porpoising, well, then you're fine, because that's within the rules. What teams like Mercedes, which are running it low and getting the bouncing, have to then figure out, because they've designed their way into that hole. So
yeah.
I'm totally on the side that I don't think, especially with the year where we have cost cap and that I don't think you should, not that I'm not saying this at all, but I'm saying, let's say, Mercedes are like, we're fucked here, let's just make something that looks really dodgy, so the FIA have to put a ruling, which means that everyone has to ride higher, and then we've actually got our secret design for the high car, and it's like, oh my god, the super chess, none of that, but I definitely on the onus of, some teams have, obviously designed around this, and everyone was porpoising at the start of the year, and certain teams have made massive ground on it, while others obviously haven't. So it's not like it's impossible. It's not like everyone's still having the issue of going, well, this is just a fundamental issue. They have to run it like this, because otherwise they're going to be off the pace. So, long story short, summary.
Yeah.
I do agree they should do something, but it's probably going to be some complicated issue.
I think it has to be complicated, otherwise you start there's bias involved. So
exactly, yes,
yeah. So
unless
totally
every team were to sign it, but obviously we've heard from comments, and even I think there was some, I don't know who was it said, whether it was Toto saying, "Oh, I've asked most drivers and they agree," and then Christian Horner seemed to come out and say, well, that's bullcrap, because I haven't heard that from many drivers at all, and it's going, oh, well, this is just politics, obviously. Be interesting to think what the FIA might do about it. I do agree that in the interest of, driver comfort and that, you could just say, well, suck it up, you're getting paid $1 billion a race. Shut up, just do it, right? But there is a degree there, and it is a precedent where it could get even worse, because there's no, as I said, like a barrier there, a rule there to stop it, and it's a tricky one. It's not one for the keyboard warriors, I think, to figure out. I think it's a complicated issue that needs to be resolved internally for sure.
Very complicated. I do think that my easy answer is just like, as I said in the Discord as well, it's like if you're in that much pain, like, because obviously it's Mercedes that are complaining and they're the ones that have it the worst. The only reason they're having so much pain is because they're trying to run it so low for performance. Just raise the ride height. Oh, you don't want to raise the ride height because you'll be slower. That's tough. So deal with it. Deal with it one way or the other. Be slow and comfortable, or be uncomfortable and fast. Or
because that's what other teams have found out how to do. They've worked it out already.
Or figure out how to get rid of the porpoising. Like, that's obviously what that's what they've spent most of the start of the season trying to do. And I think obviously being Baku with its such high speed straight and the fact that it's such a bouncy, bumpy street track,
because it's a road surface,
it doesn't help them. But other teams have done it. Raise the ride height, sacrifice the speed.
As you said, the FIA could just say, if you've got an issue with the comfort of your ride, talk to the people that made it. They knew the rules ahead of time. Everyone else did as well. Sort it out. Unless, as I say, 99% of people said, no, we need to actually sort this out. Then, okay, then that's a different internal issue. But when it's coming from, I guess talking more about their performance, to Hamilton's credit, even though he was in a lot of pain, he actually put in a pretty stonking performance. He had to hold his own. He made some great passes. He had some good fights with Vettel and Gasly and such. In comparison, Russell seemed to again just cruise to a pretty cozy podium, which is good for him.
Seems to be doing that a lot lately.
I still wouldn't necessarily go out there and still go, oh, he's the better driver of the two of them. As I say, I think this was actually, Hamilton won driver of the day, and let's be real, he hasn't won that all year when he probably could have for some other decent performances. So I think people recognize that, hey, actually, he had to fight out there. And probably the fact that he was, it's not like he was in a lot of pain and he was just riding in 20 going, oh, I'm in lots of pain, I can't drive. He was still racing his heart out, and that probably added to the fact when he got out that he was actually, able to take a breath being out of all those fights and everything, and then actually all the pain came through, and so you feel for him a bit in that regard. He certainly earned it. He earned an applause, I think, from people this weekend in his performance.
100%. But picking up a P3, P4 is, again, I think it's just they just seem to be in the best possible position. Like, they're exactly where they need to be for where their performance of the car is. Like, they need to be, if a Ferrari or a Red Bull goes out, they need to be taking that position. If all four of those cars finish, they need to be 5th and 6th. Like, that just seems to be where they are. It does seem to be top 2, Mercedes, the rest. Like, it's very clearly turning out that way.
And the rest sometimes have a chance, but Mercedes just seem to get it just that little bit right, you know what I mean? So kudos to them. Occasionally you see a guy like Bottas or whoever slip in there between them, which is kudos to them. And I guess it's good to see that they can still, I guess they're not really fighting for the top spots, but it's still nice to see other teteams fighting with the Mercedes, right? I guess that's been uncommon throughout the years, seeing, I guess especially seeing the Ferrari up top, you kind of go, but we haven't seen that for a while, so we don't really care that they're a league ahead per se, right?
Yeah.
So it's always nice. But when they do get their stuff together, as you say, and if it becomes relevant, if they up their performance, Ferrari continue to struggle, this could be critical to potentially fighting for a P2.
Absolutely.
It all adds up when you'd say at the start of the year how far behind they were from Ferrari, and yet it's very possible that they could be battling them sooner rather than later.
Genuinely, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Bottas, so I guess let's move on to Alfa Romeo. And we'll start with Bottas. He seemed to struggle this weekend. He looked uncharacteristically off the pace.
Yeah.
He went really long on the first set of hard tires, I think. I don't think he pitted with everyone else when there was like virtual safety cars and things like that. So I think he maybe suffered a little bit because of that. But yeah, in terms of pace, he just couldn't really manage the same pace that Zhou had.
I was gonna say, you wonder if I feel like it's easy to say, oh well, Zhou was at Bottas's pace a bit quicker, so obviously that means Bottas is struggling, right? Rather than saying the positive spin on it, which is saying Zhou was improving, right? I'd say it's an element of both. I think we've seen from this Alpha when they can actually set it up really well, and as they were in the first few races, then hey, they can actually bang in some proper performances when they're actually able to keep the car running and not stuffing it up in the bits, etc. and with the start. But I think we've also seen, even in Monaco and especially here, that when they maybe don't get it on the mark, then it can actually slip back and be in that more midfield mix just as easy. So you're right, he did seem to struggle, but I think more of my focus that we talked about was on Zhao sympathy corner, to borrow a phrase from the race.
Mate, he's the unluckiest dude. I don't know.
I know.
I think I said this to you. Is like, I don't know what he did in a previous life to have the luck that he did, but mate, I cannot believe the luck he's had. He has 1 championship point. He has not driven to 1 championship point. He should have a lot more than that. He has driven like, he's not even close to the worst driver on the grid. Right now, he is doing very, very well, and he is just getting so unlucky.
And as an F2 rookie, that a lot of people, myself included, to be fair, did talk down a bit, and yet he came in. He's had his head up. He's every time something's gone wrong, he's kind of said, oh, it's unfortunate, we'll beat back. I don't blame him that on the radio this weekend, he's a bit like, this is bloody ridiculous. Like, come on. And especially in a weekend where I think he was very well on for points, and he was outclassing Bottas for most of the weekend on merit. So to his credit, for a guy that we thought halfway through the year, get him out maybe, because he's just going to be another Mazepin picking up the, the places on the grid. You do feel for him. You just hope that, looking at the next race, hey, can he just get lucky because he deserves to get his 5th place now or something at this rate?
Yeah, I think he was running. What have I got here? Yeah, he was running P10, and he was in a train of at the back of a train of about 3 or 4 cars
in a pretty favorable position,
and catching as well. Like, he had pace. Like, he was on for solid points finish before. Again, it's a hydraulic failure, and it's another Ferrari engine.
What was the cause of that again?
Let's move on to someone who doesn't have a Ferrari power unit, and far from it, the Alpine, which has quite possibly an engine that's come out of a aeronautic, like a spacecraft, potentially.
I tell you what, it's kind of a spacecraft, but talking about replacements, you don't notice that they're actually chewing through those things. It's more so just that they probably end the race, open it up, and go, oh, that's cooked, throw it in the bin. But at least it made it. Like, bloody hell, it does the effort. It doesn't blow up on itself when it's running, at least.
Mate, in the preview, I was talking about how I thought that main straight in the DRS was going to be too powerful. And no one could overtake that Alpine, even with DRS down the main straight, because they were just like, I think Crofty was saying is like the 347 kilometers an hour down the main straight at one point. It's pretty fucking rapid.
I think they were the run that was showing off the ultra low wing as well. I think they had one of the thinner wings as well out there. They didn't have the fluttering. We didn't mention that Red Bull seemed to have a return of the fluttering wing in practice. They seem to fix that up, but still. But yeah, Alpine, I mean, there you go. Putting in a solid job. Again, I think we're starting to see some strengths of some cars come out, right? And weaknesses in other place. Obviously, they're like, hey, if we got some straights here, we're good as gold, and then just keep them behind in the twisty stuff, right?
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
Assuming they're not going to have a penalty for the rest of the every weekend for the rest of the year. Whenever I see the chart come up with all the bits taken, it's just everyone's green, yellow, and then red.
Yeah. Well, I guess if they have that sort of pace, and they're I think back to the Hamilton Brazil kind of thing. And if they have a fresh engine, and every other team's like, oh, we can't take penalties, we need to conserve this engine, so they're running them a bit lower. And then you're just going to see Alpine just like...
With the rocket ship, at Mexico, so P1, P2.
Yeah, they'll start from the pit lane, both of them, but they'll just end up P1, P2 in the end.
End of lap 1.
So... but yeah, they got Lonzo P7, good points for him. Ocon P10, so it's another double points finish for the Alpines. They're just sort of comfortably chugging along and getting good points for them. So really, really good weekend for them. But like you say, it could come back to bite them later in the season. But I get the feeling it's going to come back to bite a lot of teams later in the season. So, but yeah, we'll see. Who else have I got? Let's go to AlphaTauri.
I was going to say, for once, we don't need to leave AlphaTauri to last in a 20-second footnote saying they were there and one of them got 10th and that was fine.
Yeah, no,
actually,
they were looking pretty good. They had a really, really good pace. They were, I think, up with Alpine. They were pretty comfortably like top of the midfield. Way up there in both qualifying and the race. They were running, I think, in the last round of pit stops. Neither Gasly nor Tsunoda pitted. I think they were running P4, P5. There was a bit of a worry that they wouldn't really last the end, or they'd get absolutely swallowed up by everyone else because of the old tires that were on.
Yes, they took the risk. That was right. Yeah.
But yeah, they were running P4, P5 on like genuine merit, which was honestly, it's kind of more of what I expected to see coming into this year, like from like last year's predictions. I was expecting them to be doing this a bit more regularly.
As you say, you never expect them to do it every weekend, but it's almost like every second or third you expect them to be doing this, and then maybe they have a slight off and they're around the bottom of the area of the points. But we kind of just, for several races in a row, we're almost like, hey, we haven't seen them there, by the way. So when we saw them again up there at the top, it almost felt like a bit, like back to normal. Good on ya. Bit of a boost for the guys.
And both drivers, Gasly and Tsunoda, both looked very comfortable as well. Like I said, they were sort of running pretty close together on track, like in terms of pace as well. Both very good. Gasly picks up a P5. Tsunoda is the one I want to talk about, which I know obviously we had some interesting chats on his DRS, but we cut to his rear wing. It's pretty late in the race. Cut to his rear wing and it's sort of half open, and it's like, oh, that's not good. That's bad. And then, they were saying, I think they're going to have to come in to fix that. It's like I think a black and orange flag.
It was a bit like a magic trick, because it almost looked like there was a hole there, like it had been sheared off or something. Yeah. And then he started to break, and then suddenly it appeared again. It was like, oh, wait, it hasn't broken. It was like a magic trick. I was a bit like, huh? It took me back.
The reappearing rear wing.
Exactly, yeah. They've just got a spare. They've got the new DRS. They have a half one that slots in and out the side.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. It's super efficient.
Yes. So, as you say, everyone, most of the commentators were expecting, as you say, I think it's the black flag with the orange disc to say, hey, you've got a mechanical fault, you have to come in to try and fix or retire the car per se. Otherwise, it's then a black flag to say, get your bloody car off the road. What are you doing? This is unsafe.
Yeah.
Concern, of course, I mean, things do fly off the cars all the time, but often that is because they're unexpected and generally they are investigated. But when you can clearly see something that is obviously damaged, then generally the premise is you need to take safety above all else. There are catch fences, but they're not infinitely high. They're going super fast. Things could fly off, hit a driver, fly into a stand, right? So the premise is, hey, you obviously see something that's not working as intended at all, right? Bring it in, and if it's something you can tear off or whatever and make it safe, then go for it. So
they went the other way around. Rather than tearing it off, they got out the old gaffer tape.
They got out the old gaffer tape, and it was ironic in the commentary. I think we were listening to, I think it was Ted in the pit lane, and he said, and the FIA guy's running down to check, and they're like, and he's just driven off.
He's storming down the pit lane. So he was
going down to check quickly to make sure, and then they've just gone, see ya.
Oh God, go now. He's coming.
So. I mean, I guess some people liked it because there was like, what do you call it? Throwbacks to of course what's quite common in NASCAR and sports car racing, endurance racing, to see kind of quick fixes like that. But I mean, F1 runs on its own kind of rules, and I guess especially with the cars being so kind of flimsy and fast and such, and especially in the kind of circuits they race in, where, as you say, the crowds aren't that far from what's going on. There was kind of a bit of a, okay, we get it that you wanted to get back out there and try and maybe get a point or something, but it doesn't really look good on the sport as well. I've seen so many pictures on general news of the car walking around. They go, $1 trillion car with duct tape on the back. And you go a bit like, oh, like you sit in NASCAR, you go, that's the American way. But you sit in F1 and you go, oh dear, oh dear.
Yeah, it's not good. I haven't heard anything about them getting like a penalty or being fined or anything. I don't know if you read anything.
No.
Because I was expecting to hear them like like maybe not a disqualification, but like some
a slap
kind of
on the back, or almost say, hey, remind us all, this is what you do in this situation, right? Maybe they did it behind the scenes, but there's nothing public. I guess, as far as we know, no other teams have raised a raised a complaint about it, but maybe they have, but
Yeah.
maybe they just did such a bang up job. The FAA, like, that was the right thing to do. To be honest, we haven't really seen this in a while. We've seen, I think we've seen occasionally in like practice and that we've had kind of like almost like paint covers and that flapping around a bit, where they sometimes will kind of rashly tie it down. So maybe it was fine. And it's just because it was on the rear wing. And I mean, I almost would have liked if he forgot that he wasn't supposed to use the DRS and he tried to open it and it kind of then just went shattered with tape everywhere. I almost wanted him to do it and go, "Oh, I forgot, sorry," or something ridiculous. But it was a shame because it dropped him out of a good performance.
He was
certainly
doing
toe
well.
to toe with Pierre there, and again, almost kind of a bit of a letdown because, as we say, it was himself and Pierre that stayed out, and he had a couple of fast drivers behind him. I think it was Vettel and Alonso that were behind him, right?
Yep. Hamilton was, I think, as well, and
Hamilton was because he also had to pass Gasly, so he still would have had to have, as I say, fended off a few drivers, and yet we kind of got that taken away from us, which was a bit of a shame. But still a credit to both of them and their mechanics in general, unless it was their fault that the wing blew off. But it seems like one of these things. It was just a bit of unlucky circumstances. But it bodes well for the fact that, as we said, we predicted when this year started that the midfield we thought would really converge and properly tiss and toss and have drivers all over the place. And I mean, even looking at the order, there's kind of midfield teams everywhere and a lot of them out of place and that. It's
Well, let's talk about one of those that you briefly touched on, it. One of those other midfield teams that are sort of a bit all over the place, and that's Aston Martin.
Yes,
but in more recent times, how Vettel's managed to continuously put his car into Q3 and continually get into the points, like a good points place. So he got another P6
seemingly out of nowhere, considering that they went to Spain with their new upgrade. Everyone went, this is what they need. And there was still nowhere. And as you say, it almost seems like Vettel's just suddenly woken up one night and gone, "I've got it. I know what to do now. I remembered how to drive. I'm going to stop listening to Stroll."
He was sort of out of nowhere, or he was feisty, but it was almost like a quietly, like you just look, it's like, oh, at the end of the race, like, oh, he's P6.
Yes.
Oh, isn't that nice? Oh, well done.
Yep.
For a car, like you say, it was the worst car. Almost like, well, maybe not the start of the year, but like after the first couple of races, you're looking at it and you're like, that's like one
potentially the second
car.
Worst to worst car. Consistently.
And he's found pace in that, whether it is due to that new upgrade or whether or not Vettel's just sort of found his confidence, given he missed the first couple of races, right?
Races to COVID, and his return to Australia was not good.
That's right. The first 3 races were either non-appearance or pretty abysmal. So maybe he has just found a little bit more of that confidence and trust in the car. But it's good for him.
You say that he did balls up a move on.
That's true.
Who was he going around the outside of? Was it one of the AlphaTauris? I think was it Gasly. He was going on the outside of a move.
I do know the move you mean.
T3, and he seemed to make it, and then he kind of just went on, and it was a bit like, oh no! But to be fair, in the moment, he whipped it around quickly. He almost unsafely rejoined into Yuki. That was a bit on the edge. But as you say, he recovered it actually to a P6. But I think what we're saying as well is that at the end of the race, if he had made that move and got a bit of a gap, he probably would have been fighting Hamilton for P4. And if he stayed ahead of him, you'd go, we're already going Vettel P6 and good fight out there. Him in P4 fending off Hamilton. Oh my, like I'm going, mate, actually, he missed out on a bombshell news title here.
On pace as well. Like,
yes.
That's
it's not like
unreal.
he had some special spicy strategy or something. He was just comfortable out
just
there
so
compared
good,
to... Especially compared to his teammate, which back to old habits.
I can't. With
it seems
Stroll.
the better that his teammate is doing, the worse that he does. His quali was an absolute embarrassment for anyone that hasn't seen it.
It was so funny.
No words. It was hilarious. You almost thought it was scripted, or you're watching Drive to Survive, and they're just, I don't know.
Well, obviously he couldn't. He didn't do it properly the first time, so he had to go into the wall properly the second time. He did, had to do a proper job.
Dumb impact. He seemed to just go, and then his wing just went, and he just kind of went, "This just isn't my day." It's like he had a hangover or something. He just, do I turn? Oh, I don't know.
The what in his slight defense. I did read something that came out after, like I was reading an article that came out, their team found that they had an engine configuration issue with his Mercedes power unit, which meant his engine was not fully turned up for qualifying, and they estimate it was costing him about like 0.6 a lap.
So that might be why he was trying to extra push it, right?
Yeah, potentially.
Just guessing I'm not at the pace, I got an extra push, but
yeah. In saying that, he also ran a pretty nothing race as well, so it was...
What was the reason they retired it early as well? They had to retire it early, right?
They saw worrying oscillations.
That's
whatever
right,
that means.
yes. But to be fair, it's not like
not the porpoising oscillation, different oscillation, different.
He doesn't get put in the same sympathy corner as Yuki or as Zhao, though.
No.
It's not like he was in a good position and he got unlucky there.
And
especially say in contrast when his teammate was fighting tooth and nail, and even his teammate in quali hit the wall. In the race he made a mistake, and yet everyone's still talking about him fondly because at least he's up there and he's pushing his heart out, and that's just what I think the team and everyone wants to see is, you know, not Vettel going, oh, well, I'm obviously going to retire because I'm done with this.
Yeah, well, that's the Vettel we will love to see. Like you say, he made an error and still put it into Q3, and then he made an error in the race and still put it at P6. Like, he can recover from that and just keep... Yes. He has the confidence, I guess now that he has the confidence in that car, he has the confidence to be like, okay, I don't need to take it easy because maybe I pushed a little bit too hard on this corner. I trust my ability. I'm going to keep sending it. And he did, that the same corner, I think it was a few laps later, the move that he went straight on, he actually pulled off that exact same move. I don't know if it was the same. It was on a driver, obviously, a couple of...
I think it was on Alonso.
Potentially. Yeah. But I was like, they cut through his onboard and he was like going for the same move, and I was like, oh no. But no, he actually pulled it off. Yep. So, I think that's a big theme. Yep.
I mean, it's always been a big theme in F1 is you need confidence, but I think with these cars as well, it seems to be a few guys that do actually really just tune into that. And it's almost better to have a go if you do stuff up now and then, because overall it'll work out for you. While if you're never really having a go, it feels like that was a bit like Daniel Ricciardo's issue and a bit we're seeing with Sainz, right? It's almost just like, but then...
Yeah, or Bottas last year as well, like the last couple of years, Bottas where he just wouldn't go for anything and you just sit there like, this is why you're not racing further up the front.
And it seems like these cars, as you say, and it helps to have that, because I guess while the cars are allowed to run a lot closer, they're still potentially, like before when you were running so far behind that you really just like got your once or twice in a moment race where suddenly you have a point to go for it or not. Well, in this it almost seems like you need to every lap be on it and be able to go for it. It seems
you need
like
to pressure them
in this
and
race,
you can force them into
Vettel
errors. And
exactly.
Bit more mind games, bit more strategy comes into it over a long...
And it seems like Max and Charles...
laps.
Exactly. So like Max and Charles have both got a bit of that, and we saw from this race, Vettel had a bit of it as well, and Alonso seems to have a bit of that as well in himself. So,
mate, he's been real feisty this season. Just like that's a man that just does not give a shit. He's just like, I'm doing what I want, and fucking damned be the consequences.
I'm having fun with it. And everyone's going, good on you.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to see. All right. Well, the only two teams we haven't touched on. Unfortunately, it's becoming
three teams.
Yeah. Who did I miss?
Orange, white, and blue.
Oh, I missed McLaren. All right, let's talk about McLaren before we talk about the back.
We need to talk about them a little bit. I think the most interesting bit about McLaren is they seem to be buzzing around the place, but they didn't seem to be able to do much other than argue with each other, that one was fast and the other went stuck behind them.
Yeah.
It seemed almost like a case of previous years where you went, we get that you're behind and we get you feel you could be faster, but if we just start faffing around, well, we're in a train here, we want to take advantage of someone faffs it off, right?
Yep.
But other than that, they seem to kind of just be glued to the back of other people, and that was about as good as they could do.
Yeah, well, they were saying all weekend that their straight line speed or their top speed was easily the worst, and they, I think, were pretty consistently like right behind the Alpine, which had the best top speed. So
and to their credit, we saw in Spain, especially where Daniel went backwards basically on that straight. So to be able to have a longer straight, and yet they could at least kind of stay where they were, means they've obviously improved something there. But as you were saying, they kind of were just there.
Yeah, I mean, they've still picked up P8, P9, so another double
exactly.
All
they need to do is be there.
Yep.
Ricciardo, I would say on merit, finished ahead of Norris. Maybe you could say that... I'm not saying on merit as in there wasn't any luck. I'd say you could have reversed them. There could have been on alternate strategies and one would finish the other. But I think on skill level, they were kind of equal for once, I think, which is more credit to Daniel than, again, saying that Norris was off his game and that's why he was near Ricciardo. I'd more say after, I guess especially after all this negative press and such and words and that, well, he's starting to do something. So is this just going to be a splash in the pan? He just got a bit lucky because he was in a right place where he could just sit in a DRS train, or is we go to Canada and he's going to be 15th and we're like, get the fuck out of here?
Yeah, he does. I think he likes Canada from memory as well. I think he got his first actual, was it win or podium? I know it was it was a big, like,
he had a really good
moment.
Race there.
Yeah. So, I do believe he likes that track. So I think that'll be a good test to see whether or not he,
can still stand up to Norris.
Or whether, like you say, it was just a splash in the pan. But McLaren again, they're just sort of hanging in there. It would be, I think we talked about it in the podcast where it's like they need both drivers to be there, and Ricciardo's sort of he's on a knife edge. With that team at the moment, so
well, he more needs to be there for the weekends when they're really performing. It's this case again, like we see in AlphaTauri, where Gasly could always be up there, but then Yuki just wasn't at the same level, which is why they still didn't seem to be anywhere in the constructors, despite Gasly constantly, P5, P4,
Sure.
occasional win. Wow, So I think we see the same here, where they both did their job today, but then the next weekend, potentially, if Norris is in a 3 or a 4 in a lucky position and Daniel's 11, you go, oh dear. That's when they, especially in this such tight battle, that's when the difference between 4th in the constructors and 8th in the constructors, right?
Yeah, definitely. All right, now let's move on to the back two teams. I don't know how I completely missed them. I had too many notes. So many notes. Let's talk about Williams. Latifi. Oh, Latifi. You just can't stop making some dumb errors. I mean, to be fair, the very first error was not even him. It was his team member, I think, touching his car within, like, after the last red light had gone before the formation. That was like a 15-second warning. And one of the team members, like, rolled his car back.
They realized they hadn't rolled it back. And I think you saw him checking his watch almost to go, I've got time. And then afterwards it was like, you did not have time.
No. He gets a 10-second stop-go penalty, which that's a hefty penalty.
It kind of takes you out of it, but you look at the trends for the everything up to that, you go, did that really change his position? Did it really? Was he going to actually beat someone?
It was last of the finishes. He got a 5-second time penalty for ignoring blue flags.
Yes. Just give him a second one and say that's for Monaco. We're just going to get that out of the way now.
We'll talk a little bit more about that seat in the team, I think, in the podcast. I think we'll probably go into a bit more detail. There's a lot of...
we'll probably have a little more news on it as well, maybe. Some
quite
more
possibly.
Rumors.
There's some very strong rumors going around that a certain Australian driver might be getting that seat for next year, or potentially mid-season.
Or potentially sooner.
We'll see. We'll talk about that a bit more on the podcast if you're interested. I think that's a one worth really diving into. So, on the other side of the garage, though, Albon gets a P12, so he does finish a little bit higher up, but still sort of ran just sort of a nothing race, just sort of.
I think I didn't really notice him at all, but I don't think it's a bad sense. Most of the punditry I've heard on him seems to be he kind of just had a expected of him performance. It wasn't like he lucked out or really had a 150% kind of race weekend. If something fell in his lap, then he would have gotten it, but in this case he didn't. But it wasn't really his fault. The car just didn't seem too happy. I think after quali as well, the drivers kind of came out, and Albon especially was kind of like, we're not that strong here. We're just going to just drive and see what happens. And I think that's basically what he did. So I can't fault him for that.
He was in the qualifying session, the whole Alonso incident. And like, speaking of Alonso doing whatever the fuck he wants, what seemed to be him just sort of like being slow at the front, and then just like what looked like he just sort of peeled off to the side, and then Albon's like, he did it on purpose.
Yes. I think he was a bit gutted because he felt like he was on a solid lap, and
probably had a bit more pace.
We didn't really talk about quali. We can probably ever so briefly mention it, but there was a bit of a clusterfuck in terms of a lot of drivers towards the end of the first session. It seemed like there was a lot of
caused by Stroll going into the wall.
Yes. There was a lot of track evolution that we saw in quali. And then that meant that basically when Stroll crashed, I think there was 2 minutes 30 left on the clock.
Yep.
General procedure is saying, hey, this has come up a few times now and it seems a bit messy and it seems a bit shoddy. Yes, it's fun to go, oh, look, everyone's racing each other in quali, but then no one gets a lap done. You almost go, well, that was a bit sad because we didn't get to see some push laps and drivers getting one last chance to fight through. And I think we saw that through Albon when Alonso went off and he had to lose his lap and he was pissed, I think at the time, yes, he blamed it on Alonso, but really you'd argue in the moment if he's in a good lap, he knows the cluster truck going on, he has a chance to actually get into Q2 and he loses it. Anyone would be like, oh, buddy bugger.
Yeah.
So can't fault him there.
Yep.
And that's setting him up obviously to then be in a position where he would have had to get quite lucky in the race, and where he was racing didn't get that lucky. I mean, he got ahead of Yuki, I guess, and anyone else that had an issue. So to his credit, he beat everyone in that regard. But the next guy ahead of him was Bottas and then Ocon. You kind of go, he's not really going to be beating them unless he gets really lucky. So
yeah, that's a good point. So, I mean, there was only 15 finishes in the end with that many retirements. So, when you think about it, it's like, yeah, he's P12, so he's fourth last. I actually had to count that up.
Yes.
That's so bad. Fourth last. So it's not awful. But
and I guess two guys he might have been racing in, like Stroll and potentially Magnussen, right? And potentially Zhao, although not in this case. Potentially Stroll and Magnussen didn't finish, so you kind of didn't see, maybe if he had beaten both of those as well and they finished, you go, well, that was pretty good, but we didn't really get to see that. But
all right, well, let's move on to the final team in Haas. Seeing as you spoke about Magnussen, and I guess talking of qualifying as well, Mick. In particular, they were both out in Q1. Again, just didn't seem to have the pace. Mick didn't really help his own cause in that last run, though, where he just sort of decided when people started queuing up, he'd had enough and decided to ruin his lap, and I think two other people around him just completely ruined it by trying to overtake into the last corner, ruining the run, and couldn't improve anyway. So. Even though I think he probably would have just had enough time, I know it was close, but I think he got a little bit hasty in just trying to get there. But
yes, it's always hard because I feel like when they're halfway around the track and the engineer goes, "You've got 50 seconds." I'm honestly like, I've got no idea if that's close or if they're fine. I've got no idea.
Yeah. It seems like it's like, oh no, they're in the last sector. You got heaps of time, and then you forget that everyone backs up, so it's like really slow into the last little bit. And Mick. He didn't have the best race again. Finished 14th, only ahead of Latifi. I don't think that car was super good. I mean, Magnussen was running just outside the top 10 though, so that car did have some pace.
Yes.
Before
you felt like he was still similar to Albon, I guess, getting out what really he expected to and what he signed up to do, which is just try to do his best, and it seemed like he was. But as you say, in comparison, Mick seemed to kind of be nowhere again, and it's almost under the radar. It's not really being talked about because you have so many other drivers that are not only are they nowhere, but they're also putting it in the wall. I mean, Mick did kind of do that in Monaco, to be fair, but it was so spectacular, you kind of didn't see it as, a silly error. But, I mean, probably another one, to bring up in the podcast. What's going on here? Is this getting more and more concerning, is it?
It really is, definitely a bigger topic there, I think. I think Mick is, when he's now, we talked about in, I think when we're talking about him in F2, how he takes, his first year is a bit quiet, and then come that second year, he's on it. This is his second year, and he's not on it at all.
And it was kind of hard to judge his first year because of the position he was in, but I still think you could comfortably say he was a little above average there, so you'd almost suspect, hey, his first year wasn't actually that dodgy for once. Let's go into the second year. And I mean, everyone's talking going into it. Again, we'll probably talk about it more in the podcast, going up against Magnussen. What a great teammate. This is going to be a great fight. There hasn't been a fight. He's just been trailing behind him like a lost little doggy.
Yeah. Pretty much. But, I mean, K-Mag, like I said, he was running just outside the top 10, so he was an outside chance of points. And surprise, surprise, another Ferrari engine explodes.
Yes, the other.
So that's the other one. I think you summed it up pretty well earlier. It's like, I think we were robbed of what could have been a really, really exciting race. There are a couple of interesting stories there, but
there were a few little stories you felt at the end would have popped off, and they just didn't. You went, we could have used another burst tire or something.
A little bit unfortunate, but it wasn't like a dull race by any means, but I think once Leclerc went out, it was sort of like it was an easy Red Bull 1-2, and then you're sort of looking back from there to.
There was at least enough of a show going on to still be entertaining, but when we've been treated to such good racing at the front, you certainly felt it missing.
Indeed, yeah. But that's it from us. That's all I've got, unless you had anything else you wanted to mention.
No, that's all I've got for now. Thank you.
Beautiful. But we go to Canada coming up this weekend. We haven't been to Canada in quite a while, but stay tuned for our preview. I'm looking forward to that one. It's my favorite race, and I'm very excited to have it back. But yeah, thank you everyone for watching or listening if you're on Spotify. Remember to like and subscribe if you want to see more. Or follow our feed on Spotify if you want to see them pop up on your feed as well. But yeah, thanks everyone for watching / listening, and we'll see you for the Canada preview. Take care all. Ciao!